The rain fell hard the night Rufus saved my father's life, each drop hitting the pavement like tiny hammers. I remember standing there under the flickering streetlight, my sneakers soaked through, watching my dog refuse to leave the side of a man who had once thrown us both away. 10 years had passed since I'd seen that face, and now here he was, collapsed on the ground, unconscious, while the animal he'd wanted me to abandon stood guard over him like he was something worth protecting. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Maybe both. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't start with resus or redemption or any of those clean, easy words people use when they want to wrap up pain in a pretty package. It starts with an 11-year-old girl from Houston, Texas, who loved her dog more than she feared being homeless. It starts with a choice I made that changed everything, and a father who taught me that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protecting from. I found Rufus behind the dumpster at our apartment complex when I was 10. He was maybe 8 weeks old, all paws and ribs. Shivering in the August heat like cold was something that lived inside him regardless of the weather. Someone had left him in a cardboard box that had gone soft from an earlier rain, and he looked up at me with these dark brown eyes that seemed to understand things no puppy should have to understand. I didn't ask my father if I could keep him. I just brought him home, fed him scraps from my dinner, and let him sleep at the foot of my bed. By the time Dad noticed, Rufus had already claimed his spot in our lives, or at least in mine. Dad worked long hours at the construction company back then, and when he was home, he was usually too tired or too distracted to care much about what I did. My mother had left when I was 6, moved to California with a man she'd met at the grocery store where she worked. I barely remembered her voice. So it was just me and Dad in that 2-bedroom apartment with the water-stained ceiling and the neighbors who fought loud enough to shake the walls. And then it became me and Dad and Rufus, though Dad never really accepted that third part of the equation. Rufus grew fast. Within 6 months, he'd gone from fitting in my lap to needing his own space on the couch. He was a mix of something, Labrador maybe, with some shepherd or hound thrown in. His coat was black with a patch of brown on his chest, and his ears were too big for his head in that way that made him look perpetually surprised. He followed me everywhere. To school in the mornings until I made him turn back at the corner. To the corner store when I went to buy milk or bread. To the park on weekends where I'd throw sticks until my arm got tired and he still wanted more. He slept beside my bed every night, and sometimes when I woke up from nightmares about my mother leaving or my father's silence, I'd reach down and put my hand on his side, feeling his heartbeat, steady and sure. He never asked me why I was crying or told me to toughen up or looked at me like my sadness was an inconvenience. He just stayed. That's what I remember most about that year. The staying. Things started changing when Dad met Vanessa. I was 11 by then, and Rufus was just over a year old, still puppy-minded, but with the body of a full-grown dog. Dad had started going out more, getting home later, smiling at his phone in ways I'd never seen him smile at anything in our apartment. When he finally told me about her, he did it casually, like it was no big deal. "I've been seeing someone," he said one evening while we ate spaghetti from the pot because neither of us felt like doing dishes. "Her name's Vanessa. Works at the hospital. I think you'll like her." I nodded, twirling pasta around my fork. Rufus sat beside my chair, his head resting on my thigh, hoping for a dropped meatball. "That's good," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? I was 11. I didn't have a framework for understanding what it meant for my father to date, didn't know how to ask the questions that mattered. Like whether he loved her. Like whether she'd move in. Like whether there'd still be room for me in whatever new life he was building. Vanessa came over for the first time in October. She wore heels even though our apartment had carpet, and she smelled like something expensive, perfume that made the whole living room seem smaller. She was pretty in a sharp way, with straightened hair and perfect makeup and nails that looked like they'd never touched dish soap. She smiled when Dad introduced us, but it was the kind of smile people use when they're performing politeness rather than feeling it. "And this must be the famous dog," she said, eyeing Rufus, who'd come to investigate the new person in our space. "That's Rufus," I said. "He's friendly." Rufus wagged his tail, approaching her cautiously. He had good instincts about people, could usually tell within seconds whether someone was safe. He sniffed her extended hand, then sat down, looking back at me like he was waiting for confirmation that this was okay. Vanessa pulled her hand back quickly. "I'm not really a dog person," she said, laughing in a way that didn't sound like she thought anything was funny. "There's so much work, aren't they? And the smell." Rufus didn't smell. I bathed him every week, brushed him, made sure he was clean. But I didn't say that. I just watched my father watch her, saw the way he nodded along like her opinion was something that mattered more than mine. Over the next few months, Vanessa became a fixture in our lives, though fixture isn't quite the right word because it implies something stable and permanent, and she was more like weather, unpredictable and demanding. She didn't move in, but she might as well have. Her things started appearing in our bathroom, her food in our fridge, her opinions in every conversation. She didn't like Rufus. That became clear early on. She'd flinch when he came too close, complain about dog hair on the furniture even though I vacuumed constantly, make comments about how much we spent on dog food when that money could go towards something useful. Dad started agreeing with her, or at least not disagreeing, which amounted to the same thing. "Maybe we should keep him outside more," he suggested one evening after Vanessa had left. "It's winter," I said, "and we live in an apartment. There's nowhere outside to keep him." "Well, maybe in the bathroom when Vanessa's here. Just so she's comfortable." I looked at Rufus, who was lying on his bed in the corner, chewing a rope toy. He wasn't bothering anyone. He never bothered anyone. "He lives here too," I said quietly. Dad sighed, that particular sigh he developed since meeting Vanessa, the one that said I was being difficult, unreasonable, childish. "I'm not asking you to get rid of him. I'm just asking you to be considerate." But here's the thing about being 11 and having your world slowly rearranged around you. You start to understand that consideration only flows one direction. Nobody was asking Vanessa to be considerate of me, of the fact that this was my home first, that Rufus was my family. Nobody was asking Dad to consider that maybe I needed something stable in my life, something that didn't change moods or make demands or look at me like I was an obstacle to overcome. So I started keeping Rufus in my room more when Vanessa visited. We'd sit on my bed together, me doing homework, him sleeping with his head on my lap, and I'd listen to the sound of my father laughing at her jokes through the thin walls, becoming someone I didn't quite recognize. Valentine's Day approached, and with it came a shift in the apartment's atmosphere, tension building like humidity before a storm. Dad became preoccupied, distracted, checking his bank account on his phone with increasing frequency. I'd hear him on the phone with Vanessa late at night, his voice low and promising, talking about dinner reservations and gifts and making the day special. Money had always been tight. Dad worked hard, but construction work was unpredictable, hours cut in winter, paychecks stretched thin. We got by. We always got by. But there wasn't much left over for extras, for romantic gestures or expensive presents. I didn't understand the pressure he was under, not really. I was 11. What did I know about adult relationships, about the weight of expectation, about trying to prove your worth through material things? I just knew that Dad seemed stressed, that Vanessa's visits had become more frequent and more tense, that conversations between them often ended with her voice going sharp and his going apologetic. The Thursday before Valentine's Day, I came home from school to find Dad sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. Rufus greeted me at the door like always, tail wagging, whole body wiggling with the joy of my return. I dropped my backpack, gave him the attention he demanded, then went to grab a snack. "We need to talk," Dad said. Those 4 words. I swear, nothing good ever follows those 4 words. I sat down across from him, Rufus settling at my feet. Dad wouldn't look at me directly, kept his eyes on his phone, on his hands, on the table's surface, anywhere but my face. "I've been thinking," he started, "about Rufus." My stomach dropped. Just dropped, like an elevator with cut cables. "What about him?" "He's a good dog," Dad said, which is what people say right before they tell you why good isn't good enough. "And he's valuable. Purebred labs are going for $400–500 right now. Even a mix like him, someone would pay good money." I couldn't breathe right. The air in the kitchen felt wrong, too thick, too warm. "You want to sell my dog?" "Our situation," he said, still not looking at me. "It's tight right now. And Valentine's Day, Vanessa has expectations. She's been looking at this bracelet, nothing crazy expensive, but it's something she really wants, and I want to give it to her. I want to show her that I can provide, that I'm serious about this." "So sell something else," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted, younger than I felt. "What else is there to sell?" "We don't have anything worth anything except my dog. Except the one thing in this apartment that's actually mine." Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. It's not about taking something from you. It's about making smart choices for the family. Rufus is family. Rufus is a dog." He said it flat, final, like that settled everything. "And Vanessa, she's going to be part of our lives long term. I need you to understand that and accept it." I looked down at Rufus, who was looking up at me, sensing my distress in that way dogs do, reading the tension in my body, the shift in my breathing. His tail had stopped wagging. He pressed closer to my leg. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" I said no. "You're not selling him. He's mine. I found him. I take care of him. He's my responsibility and my family, and you can't just decide to get rid of him because your girlfriend wants jewelry." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Dad stood up slowly, and I'd never noticed before how big he was, how much space he took up, how small I felt in comparison. "You don't get to tell me no," he said quietly. "I'm your father. This is my house. And I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Then I'm telling you it's wrong." I stood up too, even though my legs were shaking. It's wrong to sell something that isn't yours. It's wrong to pick her over me. It's wrong to throw away something loyal and good because you need money for a bracelet. His face changed then, hardened into something I'd never seen directed at me before. Anger, yes, but also something colder. Calculation. "You think you know everything," he said. "You think you understand how the world works, what it takes to keep a roof over your head, food in your belly. You're 11 years old and you're trying to tell me how to run my life, how to manage my money, how to handle my relationship. I'm trying to tell you not to sell my dog. And I'm trying to build a future. Vanessa and I, we're talking about getting serious. Maybe moving in together. Maybe more. And she's made it clear that she doesn't want a dog in the picture. So you have a choice to make." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What choice? The dog goes or you do." The words hung in the air between us, impossible and real. Rufus whined softly, pressing against my leg harder, like he could hold me there through proximity alone. "You don't mean that," I whispered. "I mean exactly that. I'm done negotiating with a child about what's best for this family. Rufus gets sold. We use the money for something that actually matters and life goes on. Or you can decide that a dog is more important than having a home, and you can figure out where you and he are going to sleep tonight." I couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of the equation he was presenting. How did it come to this? How did we get from Dad being tired, but present to Dad being someone who'd throw his daughter out over a Valentine's gift? You're choosing her over me, I said, and my voice broke on the last word. I'm choosing reality over fantasy. Grow up, little girl. The world doesn't run on feelings and loyalty. It runs on money and practical decisions and knowing when to let go of things that are holding you back. I looked at Rufus. He looked back at me, trusting, waiting for me to fix this the way I'd fixed everything else in his life. I'd saved him from that cardboard box. I'd fed him when he was starving. I'd loved him when no one else would. And I realized that my father was asking me to be like my mother, to choose the easy path, to walk away from something that needed me because staying was hard. Okay, I said softly. Dad's expression shifted, relief crossing his face. Okay, you'll do the right thing? Okay, I'll leave. The relief disappeared. What? You said I have a choice. The dog goes or I do. I choose me and Rufus. Don't be stupid, he snapped. Where are you going to go? You're 11 years old. You can't survive out there alone. Then you shouldn't have given me the choice. I walked to my room, Rufus following, my father's voice rising behind me, yelling now about responsibility and consequences and how I'd come crawling back within a day. I packed a backpack with clothes, grabbed the money I'd saved from birthdays and odd jobs, clipped Rufus's leash to his collar. When I came back out, Dad was standing in the living room, face red, hands clenched. You walk out that door, he said, and you don't come back. You understand me? I'm not playing these games. You leave, you're gone. I'm done. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find some trace of the father I remembered from before. The one who'd taught me to ride a bike. Who'd made pancakes on Saturday mornings. Who'd held me when I cried about Mom leaving. He wasn't there anymore. Or maybe he'd never been there at all, and I just invented him because I needed someone to believe in. Bye, Dad, I said. I walked out. He didn't stop me. The door closed behind us, and I stood in the hallway with my dog and my backpack and absolutely no idea what came next. Rufus looked up at me, tail wagging slightly, like this was an adventure, like everything would be okay because we were together. I wanted to believe him. The first night was the hardest, not because of the cold or the fear, but because of the finality. I kept expecting Dad to come looking for me, to realize what he'd done, to apologize. I sat on a bench at the park 3 blocks from our apartment until it got dark, then found a spot under the overhang by the closed community center where the rain couldn't reach us. Rufus curled up against me, sharing warmth. I didn't sleep much. Every sound made me jump, every shadow seemed threatening. But Rufus stayed alert, his ears swiveling toward every noise, his body tense and protective even as he rested. When morning came, I was still there, still breathing, still making the choice to stay gone. I went to school because I didn't know what else to do. Tied Rufus to a tree by the back fence where I could see him from my classroom window, snuck him water at lunch, pretended everything was normal even though I had no idea where I'd sleep that night. My best friend, Keisha, noticed something was off. She always noticed. You look terrible, she said at lunch, sitting down across from me with her tray. Thanks. I'm serious. Are you sick? I wanted to tell her everything, wanted to pour out the whole story about Dad and Vanessa and the choice I'd made. But saying it out loud would make it real in a different way, would require sympathy and questions and maybe phone calls to adults who'd force me back home. Just didn't sleep well, I said. She studied me with those sharp eyes of hers, not buying it, but also not pushing. Keisha's mom was a nurse and her dad ran a barbershop, and their house always smelled like cooking and rang with voices and laughter. She had 3 siblings and a dog of her own and a stability I envied so much it physically hurt. You know you can tell me stuff, right? She said. I know. And my mom always says you're welcome at our place anytime. I know that too. But I couldn't go to Keisha's house. Couldn't bring my problems into their warmth and safety and ask them to fix what my own father had broken. So I just smiled and changed the subject, and she let me, and the day continued in its strange pantomime of normalcy. That afternoon, I discovered the public library stayed open until 8 p.m. They had heating, bathrooms, water fountains, and nobody questioned a kid doing homework in the corner. Rufus couldn't come inside, so I tied him up outside where I could see him through the window, brought him water in a stolen McDonald's cup, and made that space our new temporary home. The librarian, Ms. Chin, noticed me there every afternoon that week. On Thursday, she approached my table with a quiet smile. "You're here a lot," she said. "I like reading." "I can see that." She glanced toward the window where Rufus waited patiently. "That your dog?" "Yes, ma'am. He's very well behaved. Just sits there, doesn't bark or pull at the leash. He's a good dog." Miss Chin sat down across from me, and I tensed, waiting for the questions I couldn't answer, the concern that would trigger interventions I didn't want. "When I was about your age," she said instead, "I had a cat named Buddha." Ridiculous name for a cat, but he was calm and wise-looking, so it fit. My parents went through a bad divorce, lots of yelling and broken things, and Buddha was the only constant in my life. The only thing that didn't change moods or take sides or make me feel like I was the problem. I didn't say anything, just listened. My mother wanted me to get rid of him when we moved into a smaller apartment. Said we couldn't afford pet deposits and vet bills. Said I needed to be practical. What did you do? I kept him. Found ways to make it work. Wasn't easy, but some choices aren't about easy. They're about knowing who you are and what you won't compromise on. She stood up then, placed a library card on the table in front of me. "This is yours," she said. "You can check out books, use the computers, stay warm until closing. And there's a youth shelter 2 blocks north on Fairview. They take walk-ins, no questions asked, allow pets if they're well behaved. Just in case you ever need that information." My throat got tight. "Thank you." "You're welcome. And if you ever need to talk or just need someone to watch your dog while you use the bathroom, I'm usually here." She walked away before I could respond, before I could cry, before the kindness could break through the wall I'd built to keep functioning. That night, I went to the shelter she'd mentioned. It was a plain building with fluorescent lights and linoleum floors, but it was warm and dry, and they had beds available. A tired-looking woman at the front desk checked me in with minimal questions, assigned me a cot in the girls' section, and showed me where I could keep Rufus for the night. "He stays in the kennel area," she explained. "We have volunteers who'll make sure he's fed and walked. You can visit during free time, but he can't be in the sleeping quarters." I hated leaving him in a strange place with strange people, but he handled it better than I did. Settling into the kennel they assigned him like he understood this was temporary, necessary, survivable. The shelter became our routine. School during the day, library until closing, shelter at night. Weekends were harder because I had more time to fill, more hours to navigate without purpose. I'd walk Rufus around the neighborhood, exploring Houston streets, learning which areas were safe and which made my skin prickle with warning. I'd sit in parks and watch families, trying to understand what I'd lost, what I'd never really had. Money was the constant problem. The shelter was free, but I needed food for myself and Rufus, needed quarters for laundry, needed bus fare and school supplies and all the tiny expenses that add up when you're trying to survive. The cash I'd brought with me ran out within 2 weeks. I started collecting cans, spending hours walking through parks and along streets, filling garbage bags with aluminum. The recycling center gave me 3 cents per can. I needed roughly 300 cans to buy 1 bag of dog food. I did it anyway. I also started noticing food in ways I never had before. The free lunch program at school became crucial. I'd eat everything on my tray, pocket the apple or orange for later. Some teachers kept snacks in their classrooms for students who needed them. I became one of those students, though I never asked directly, just gratefully accepted when offered. Keisha figured it out about 3 weeks in. I'd been too hungry to hide it anymore, had eaten my lunch too fast and stared at hers too long. "You're not going home after school, are you?" she said quietly. I considered lying. Decided I was too tired. "No." "How long?" "3 weeks." Jesus. She pushed half her sandwich across the table. "Where are you staying?" "Youth shelter on Fairview." "It's okay. They're nice there. And your dad doesn't want me back." She didn't ask why, and I loved her for that, for understanding that some explanations were too painful to give. "Come to dinner tonight," she said. "My mom makes too much food anyway, and she's been asking about you." "I can't." "Yes, you can." 6 o'clock. "Bring Rufus. My dog needs someone to play with." So I went. Keisha's house was exactly as warm and loud and alive as I remembered. Her mom, Mrs. Patterson, took one look at me and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than comfortable, like she was trying to press safety into my bones through proximity alone. "Baby," she said, "you look thin. Sit down. Let me make you a plate." Dinner was fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread. I ate until my stomach hurt, until Keisha's little brother made a joke about me joining a hot dog eating contest, until I felt human again instead of just functional. Rufus played in the backyard with their pit bull, 2 dogs racing and wrestling and being gloriously, normally canine. Watching him like that, I realized how much I'd asked him to carry, how much he'd adapted to our new reality without complaint. After dinner, Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside. "Keisha told me you're staying at the shelter," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "And your father?" "We had a disagreement." She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much hardship to judge anyone's survival choices. "You're welcome here anytime," she said. "For dinner, to do laundry, to shower, whatever you need. I can't have you stay overnight. We don't have the space, and there's legal issues with housing someone else's child without permission. But during the day, after school, you've got a place here. Understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And if you ever want to talk about that disagreement, or if you need help with your father, you let me know. I'm not saying I can fix it, but I can listen. Sometimes that helps." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just promise you'll take care of yourself. And that beautiful dog of yours." That became my new pattern. School, then Keisha's house for a few hours, then library, then shelter. Mrs. Patterson fed me dinner most nights, let me wash clothes in her machine, gave me the stability of routine when everything else was chaos. Rufus thrived despite everything. He never complained, never seemed anxious or stressed. He just stayed by my side when we were together, adapted when we were apart, and continued being the one constant good thing in my radically transformed life. I started to understand that survival wasn't about having everything you needed. It was about making what you had stretched far enough to see tomorrow. 3 months in, a social worker from the school district contacted me. Someone had noticed my situation, probably a teacher, maybe the counselor I'd talked to about updated contact information. Her name was Diana, and she was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of talking that I appreciated. "I'm not here to force you back home," she said when we met in an empty classroom after school. "But I am here to make sure you're safe and that you understand your options." "I'm safe." "You're 11 years old living in a shelter. That's not ideal." "It's better than where I was." She didn't argue with that, just made notes on her yellow legal pad. "Tell me about your father," she said. So I did. Not everything, not the deep, painful parts, but the facts. The ultimatum. The choice. The closed door. "And you haven't had any contact since?" "No, ma'am." "Do you want to?" Did I? I'd thought about it constantly those first few weeks, imagined him realizing his mistake, showing up at the shelter, apologizing. But as time passed, that fantasy faded. He'd made his choice. I'd made mine. There was a cleanness to that, a terrible clarity. "No," I said. "I don't want contact." Diana studied me for a long moment. You're very mature for 11. I don't think maturity is a choice at this point. She smiled slightly. No, I suppose not. Okay, here's what I can offer. There are programs for youth in transition, resources for housing assistance, food support, educational help. I can connect you with those services. I can also work with the shelter to ensure you have stable placement there as long as needed. What about Rufus? Your dog. He stays with me. That's non-negotiable. I understand. And yes, most transitional housing programs allow pets. We'll make sure any placement we find accommodates both of you. Something loosened in my chest, some tension I'd been holding since that first night. Someone was helping. Someone saw me as worth helping. There's also the possibility of foster care, Diana continued carefully. It's not ideal, and it's not guaranteed, but there are families who... No. The word came out sharp. I'm not going into a system where someone else gets to decide whether my dog stays or goes. I'm not risking that again. She nodded, not arguing. Okay, then we focus on supporting you where you are. But I need you to understand that this gets harder as you get older. The shelter is a short-term solution. We need to think long-term. I'm 11. Long-term thinking feels impossible right now. Fair enough. But start trying anyway. Think about what you want your life to look like in a year, in 5 years. Because you're not going to be in crisis mode forever, and when things stabilize, you'll want to have some direction. I thought about that after she left. What did I want my life to look like? The question felt too big, too abstract. I wanted to not be hungry. I wanted Rufus to be safe. I wanted to stop feeling like the ground beneath me could disappear at any moment. But beyond that, I didn't know. Couldn't imagine. Months became a year. I turned 12 at the shelter, celebrated with a cupcake Keisha brought from her house and a new collar for Rufus that Mrs. Patterson had picked out. It wasn't what birthdays were supposed to look like, but it was something, and something was infinitely better than nothing. School became my anchor. I was good at it, had always been good at it, but now I was focused in a new way. Education was a path out, a way to build something that couldn't be taken away. I studied obsessively, raised my hand in every class, stayed after school for extra help when I needed it. Teachers noticed, started giving me opportunities, recommending me for programs, writing letters of recommendation for summer enrichment courses. I collected their belief in me like currency, stored it away for the days when I didn't believe in myself. The shelter staff noticed too. Started giving me more responsibility, asked me to help with younger kids, to show new arrivals around, to be a positive example. It felt good to be useful, to have my survival mean something beyond just my own continuation. Rufus grew into his full size, became a strong, protective presence. He still slept in the kennel area at night, but the volunteers let me spend time with him before bed, and he'd press his head against my chest while I told him about my day, about the test I'd aced or the friend I'd made or the caseworker meeting I'd survived. He never judged my pace, never seemed impatient with how slow progress felt. Just stayed, loyal and constant, proof that love didn't have to be complicated or conditional. When I was 13, Diana helped me get placed in a transitional living program specifically for teens. It was a step up from the shelter, a small apartment I shared with 2 other girls, supervised by a live-in counselor, but with more independence, more privacy. Rufus came with me, slept on a bed beside mine, had a small yard to play in. The other girls became something like sisters. Maya was 15, had aged out of foster care, was working on her GED while holding down a job at a grocery store. Tasha was 14, had run from an abusive home, was quieter than me but fierce when it mattered. We learned to live together, to share space and food and the complicated work of healing. We fought sometimes, mostly about dishes or whose turn it was to walk the dogs. Tasha had a small terrier mix named Pickles, but we also supported each other in ways that felt important, necessary. I started high school, joined the debate team, made honor roll, kept studying like my life depended on it, because in many ways it did. Mrs. Patterson still fed me dinner regularly, still treated me like I was worth caring about, still reminded me that my circumstances didn't define my worth. Keisha and I stayed close through high school, even as our lives diverged in other ways. She had college plans, family support, a clear path forward. I had determination and Rufus and a growing belief that I could build something from nothing if I just kept working. "You're going to do something amazing," Keisha told me senior year, sitting on her porch while our dogs played in the yard. "I don't know it yet, but I can feel it." "I just want stable," I said. "I just want to not have to worry about where I'm sleeping or whether I can afford food." "You'll get there. And then you'll want more, and you'll get that too." I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. I graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to Houston Community College. It wasn't a four-year university, wasn't the dream school some of my classmates were heading to, but it was mine, earned through grinding and sacrifice and refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier. I moved into another transitional apartment, this one for young adults aging out of support systems. Rufus came with me, always came with me, now 7 years old and starting to slow down slightly, gray creeping into the black fur around his muzzle. I studied social work. Seemed fitting, considering all the social workers who'd helped me survive. I wanted to be that person for someone else, wanted to turn my experience into something useful rather than just painful. College was hard in different ways than high school. The work was more demanding, the expectations higher. I worked part-time at a coffee shop to pay for things the scholarship didn't cover, juggled classes and work and taking care of Rufus, slept less than I should have and stressed more than was healthy. But I was doing it, building something, creating a life that was mine on purpose rather than by default. I thought about my father sometimes, less frequently as years passed, but still occasionally. Wondered if he ever regretted his choice. If he'd married Vanessa. If he ever looked at the empty room that had been mine and felt anything at all. I'd Googled him once, my first year of college. Found his Facebook page, saw pictures of him and Vanessa at restaurants on vacation, looking happy in that performed way people look happy on social media. There were no pictures of me. No indication I'd ever existed. That hurt less than I expected. Or maybe it hurt exactly as much as I expected, which meant I'd built up sufficient armor to survive it. I never reached out. Never tried to mend what he'd broken. Some things I'd learned weren't meant to be fixed. They were meant to be survived and then left behind. I was 21 when everything changed again, though I didn't know it at first. Just another Thursday evening in October, the kind of night where the heat finally breaks and Houston remembers it's supposed to have fall. I'd finished my shift at the coffee shop, picked up groceries, and was walking home to my apartment with Rufus beside me, his leash loose in my hand because he never pulled, never strayed. He was 9 years old now, moved a little slower, needed more rest between walks. The vet said he was healthy for his age, but age was the thing we couldn't outrun. I'd started preparing myself for the reality that dogs don't live forever, that someday I'd have to face a world without him in it. But not yet. Please, not yet. We were 3 blocks from home when Rufus stopped suddenly, his whole body going rigid in that way that meant something was wrong. His ears swiveled forward, nose working the air, every muscle tense with focus. "What is it?" I asked, following his gaze down the side street we were passing. He whined low in his throat, then started pulling toward the street, insistent in a way he never was. "Rufus, we need to get home. I've got frozen stuff that's going to." He barked. Sharp, urgent, the kind of bark he only used when something was genuinely wrong. Then he pulled harder, and I let him lead because in 9 years he'd never steered me wrong. We turned down the side street, darker than the main road, lined with old buildings and empty lots. Rain had started, light but steady, making the pavement slick. Rufus pulled me forward, past a closed mechanic shop, past a boarded-up house, toward what looked like an alley between two warehouses. That's when I saw him. A man lying on the ground, half in the alley, half on the sidewalk. My first instinct was to turn around, to not get involved, because Houston streets taught you that sometimes people lying on the ground were dangerous or high or any number of things that made approaching them a bad idea. But Rufus pulled harder, whining continuously now, and something in his urgency made me trust him over my fear. "Hello," I called out, stopping about 10 feet away. "Are you okay?" No response. The man wasn't moving. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and that's when I saw his face. Everything stopped. The rain, the traffic noise from the main street, my heartbeat, everything just stopped. It was my father. 10 years older, heavier, grayer, but unmistakably him. Lying unconscious on the wet pavement, one arm bent at a wrong angle, blood seeping from a cut on his forehead. I should have kept walking. Should have called 911 anonymously and disappeared before he woke up, before I had to deal with the complication of him existing in my carefully rebuilt life. But Rufus had other ideas. He walked right up to my father, sniffed him carefully, then sat down beside him, refusing to move. He looked back at me with those dark eyes that had seen me through everything, and I understood what he was asking. "Stay. Help. This is what we do." "Damn it," I whispered. I called 911, told them there was an unconscious man who looked injured, gave them the address. Then I knelt down beside my father, checking for breath, for pulse, for signs of what had happened. He was breathing, shallow but steady. His pulse was weak but present. The arm definitely looked broken, and the head wound was bleeding steadily enough to be concerning. No signs of what had caused this, no nearby car accident, no obvious assault evidence, no discarded bottles to suggest he'd passed out drunk. Maybe a medical emergency. Heart attack, stroke, diabetic shock. Something internal and catastrophic. I pressed my hand against the head wound, trying to slow the bleeding, and waited for the ambulance. Rufus stayed pressed against my father's other side, as if his proximity alone could keep the man alive. "Why are you doing this?" I asked my dog quietly. He threw us away. He chose a bracelet over us. Rufus just looked at me, patient and sure. The ambulance arrived within 7 minutes, paramedics moving with efficient urgency. They asked me questions. Did I know him? Did I know what happened? Was I family? And I answered mechanically, yes, I knew him. No, I didn't know what happened. Yes, I was family. That last part tasted strange in my mouth. Family. Were we still that? Had we ever been? They loaded him into the ambulance, and one of the paramedics turned to me. "Are you riding with us?" I should have said no. Should have given them his information and walked away, let him wake up alone the way I'd woken up alone for years. But Rufus was already climbing into the ambulance like he'd made the decision for both of us, and what was I supposed to do? Leave my dog? So I climbed in too, sat on the bench while they worked, watched them stabilize my father and radio ahead to the hospital. Rufus sat at my feet, calm and steady, like this was exactly where we were supposed to be. At the hospital, they rushed my father into emergency, and I was left in the waiting room with forms I didn't know how to fill out. Insurance information I didn't have. Emergency contacts I couldn't provide. A nurse approached me after about 20 minutes. "Are you the daughter?" "Yes. We've stabilized him. Looks like he had a cardiac event, fell and hit his head, broke his arm in the process. He's lucky you found him when you did. Another hour in the rain and we might be having a different conversation." Lucky. That was one word for it. "Can I see him?" "Not yet. Doctor wants to run more tests and he's still unconscious. But you can wait here and we'll update you as we know more." So I waited. Rufus beside me, groceries forgotten back at the apartment, my life on pause in a too bright waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and desperation. I pulled out my phone, thought about calling someone. But who? Keisha was at grad school in Austin. Mrs. Patterson would come if I asked, but what would I even say? Diana had moved to a different agency years ago, and I'd lost touch. I was alone with this. Me and Rufus and a choice I didn't want to make. Around midnight, a doctor came out, still in scrubs, looking tired. "You're here for Mr. Williams?" "Yes." "He's awake. Asking for Vanessa. Do you know how to contact her?" Something cold settled in my chest. Of course he was asking for her. Of course. "No," I said. "I don't." The doctor consulted his chart. We couldn't find any emergency contact information in his wallet. "Do you have his phone?" "We might be able to reach her that way." "I don't have his phone. I just found him on the street." The doctor looked confused. "But you're his daughter?" "It's complicated." He seemed to decide not to pursue that line of questioning. "Well, he's stable for now. We're admitting him overnight for observation, probably surgery on the arm tomorrow. He's asking to see family if you want to go in." Did I want to go in? Want wasn't the right word. But Rufus stood up, tail wagging slightly, and I understood that we'd come this far. Might as well see it through. "Okay," I said. The doctor led me back through the maze of hallways to a room in the cardiac unit. My father was in the bed, looking smaller than I remembered, older, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically. His eyes were closed, but they opened when we entered. He looked at me. Really looked, and I saw the moment recognition hit, saw his expression cycle through confusion, shock, and something that might have been fear. "You," he whispered. "Me." His gaze dropped to Rufus, who'd walked right up to the bed, tail wagging, acting like this was a happy reunion instead of a collision of painful history. "And the dog," he said, voice rough. "You still have the dog." "I still have the dog." A long silence. The machines beeped. Outside the room, someone's phone was ringing. A doctor was being paged. Life continued in its relentless forward motion. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked. "Rufus found you. Wouldn't leave. So I called 911. You saved my life." I didn't confirm or deny that. Just stood there, watching him process the impossibility of this moment. "Where's Vanessa?" he asked, looking past me toward the door like she might materialize. "I don't know. The doctor said you were asking for her." Something shifted in his expression, something broken and sad. "She's gone. Left 2 years ago. Took half the savings and moved to Arizona with some guy she met at the hospital." I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt like karma had done its work. But all I felt was tired. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it, because regardless of everything else, being abandoned hurt. I knew that better than anyone. "You're sorry," he repeated, like the words didn't make sense. "I threw you out. Over a bracelet. Over her. And you're sorry that she left me. I'm sorry that you built your life around someone who didn't stay. I know how that feels." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About everything. About what mattered. About you. About that dog. I was so wrong, and by the time I realized it, you were gone and I didn't know how to fix it. You could have tried to find me. I was ashamed. Terrified. You were 11 years old, and I chose my girlfriend's approval over my own daughter's safety. What kind of father does that? The kind who doesn't deserve to be called father," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. He flinched, but didn't argue. "You're right. I don't deserve it. Don't deserve you being here. Don't deserve you saving my life." Rufus had laid down beside the bed, his head on his paws, watching us both with those patient eyes. "I didn't save your life for you," I said. "I did it for him. Because he wouldn't leave you. Because after everything, he still saw something worth protecting." My father looked at Rufus for a long moment. "He's a good dog. Best dog. Best friend. Best family I ever had." The words hung there, an indictment and a truth. "Where have you been?" my father asked. "All these years. Where did you go?" So I told him. Not everything, not the worst parts, but enough. The shelter, the transitional housing, Mrs. Patterson's kindness, college, the life I'd built from nothing. He listened without interrupting, and I watched him understand the cost of his choice, saw it settle into him piece by piece. "You did all that alone," he said when I finished. "You were a child and you survived all that." I wasn't alone. I had Rufus. You shouldn't have had to survive any of it. You should have had a home and a parent who protected you and a childhood that wasn't about basic survival. But I didn't. And now we're here. Another silence, longer this time. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally. "I don't even know if I want it because I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I regret every single day. Every choice I made that led to losing you. Regret doesn't fix anything. I know, but it's what I have." A nurse came in then, checked his vitals, adjusted his gave me a sympathetic smile that said visiting hours were technically over, but she'd give us a few more minutes. When she left, my father spoke again. "Are you going to stay? Or are you going to walk out and never come back, the way I deserve?" I looked at Rufus, who looked back at me, offering no judgment, no guidance. Just companionship, whatever I decided. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what staying looks like or whether I even can. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA and a terrible history." That's fair. But I'm not 11 anymore. I'm not making decisions out of fear or desperation or because someone gave me an ultimatum. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to think about it and then I'll decide. Okay. I turned to leave, Rufus standing to follow me. "Wait," my father said. "What's your number?" In case the hospital needs to reach you." I almost said no. Almost walked out without giving him any way to contact me, maintaining the clean separation we'd had for a decade. But something in his voice, or maybe something in Rufus's patient presence, made me pull out my phone. "Give me yours," I said. "I'll text you so you have mine." He recited the number. I sent a simple text, "It's me." 3 words, inadequate and enormous. "Thank you," he said, "for finding me, for staying, for not letting me die alone in that alley." "Thank Rufus," I said. "I would have walked right past you." I left before he could respond, Rufus trotting beside me, and we walked out into the night that had somehow become early morning. The rain stopped, the air cool and clean. I didn't go back to the hospital the next day, or the day after that. I went to class, went to work, took care of Rufus, and tried to process what had happened, what it meant, what I was supposed to do with it. My father texted me once, "They're discharging me tomorrow. No one to pick me up, but I can take a cab. Wanted you to know in case you were wondering." I didn't respond. Keisha called me that weekend, and I told her everything. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. "I have no idea." "Do you want a relationship with him?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to punish him forever. Part of me thinks maybe people can change. Part of me is just exhausted by the whole thing." "All of those parts get to exist," she said. "You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to decide ever if you don't want to." Rufus liked him. Just walked right up and refused to leave. Rufus is a good judge of character. But he's also a dog who loves unconditionally. You're a person who gets to love conditionally if that's what you need. I appreciated that, the permission to be complicated, to not have clean answers. "What would you do?" I asked. "I'm not you. I didn't live your life. But if you want my opinion, I think you should at least have a conversation. Not for him. For you. So you can make a choice based on information rather than assumption." That made sense. Keisha usually made sense. So the following Tuesday, I texted my father, "Coffee?" Thursday afternoon. His response came within minutes. "Yes. Anywhere you want." "Thank you." We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between his apartment and mine. I got there early, claimed a corner table, ordered a latte I didn't really want. Rufus sat beside my chair, calm and observant. My father arrived exactly on time, his broken arm in a cast, moving carefully like someone still recovering. He looked nervous, uncertain, nothing like the confident man who'd thrown me out a decade ago. He ordered coffee, sat down across from me, and we stared at each other for a moment that felt endless. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said finally. "I didn't do it for you. I know. You've made that clear. But I'm grateful anyway." "Tell me what happened," I said. "With Vanessa. With your life. All of it." So he did. Told me how they'd gotten engaged 6 months after I left, how he'd spent money he didn't have trying to make her happy, trying to prove he could provide. How she'd gotten bored, started cheating, left him for someone with more money and fewer complications. How he'd spent the last 2 years alone, working the same construction job, living in a smaller apartment, realizing too late what he'd traded away. "I looked for you," he said. "About a year after Vanessa left. Went to your old school, tried to find out where you'd gone. They wouldn't tell me anything, said you were in the system and they couldn't share information. I was in transitional housing. Then college. You're in college." He said it like it was miraculous. "Graduating this year with my bachelor's. Starting a master's program in social work next fall." Pride flickered across his face, quickly followed by grief, the recognition of everything he'd missed. "You did all that without any help from me." "I had help. Just not from you." He nodded, accepting that. "I don't have excuses. I was selfish and stupid and I prioritized the wrong things. I thought Vanessa was my chance at happiness, at having someone choose me the way your mother didn't. So you made me pay for mom's choices." "Yes. And I'm sorry." Those words don't fix anything, but they're true. I'm sorry for all of it. I sipped my coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. He looked sincere, broken in ways that seemed genuine. But sincerity didn't erase harm. Regret didn't undo consequences. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Why agree to this meeting?" "I want." He stopped, considered. "I want you to know I'm sorry. I want you to know I think about you all the time, wonder who you became, whether you're okay. I want to know if there's any possibility of us having any kind of relationship, even a small one. But mostly I just want you to be okay, to be happy, to have the life you deserve. I am okay. I am happy mostly. And I'm building the life I deserve. I did all that without you. I know. So what changes if I let you back in? What do I gain?" He thought about that, really thought. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'd just be a complication, a reminder of pain. But maybe you'd gain knowing what happened to me. Maybe you'd gain the chance to be angry at me directly instead of carrying it around. Maybe you'd gain a father who's trying to do better, even if it's too late to matter. "It is too late," I said quietly. "You can't be my father the way you should have been. That chance is gone." "I know. But maybe you could be something else. Someone I know, who's related to me, who's trying. I don't know what to call that relationship, but maybe it exists." His eyes got bright again, hope and grief mixing together. "I would take that. Whatever version of that you're willing to give." Rufus shifted beside me, placing his head on my lap, grounding me in the present moment. I ran my fingers through his fur, feeling his warmth, his steadiness. "This doesn't mean I trust you," I said. "It doesn't mean we're okay or that I've forgiven you. It means I'm willing to see whether there's anything worth building. That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is. So don't waste it." We started slow. Coffee once a month, then twice a month. Brief conversations about safe topics, my classes, his work, Houston weather, anything that didn't require diving into painful history. Gradually, carefully, we built something. Not a traditional father-daughter relationship, that was lost to us. But something adjacent to it, a connection based on choice rather than obligation, on adults meeting each other rather than parent and child. I learned things about him I'd never known. That he'd grown up poor, that his own father had been absent, that he'd never learned how to be a parent because he'd never seen it modeled. That he'd struggled with depression after my mother left, had made bad choices from a place of pain rather than malice. None of that excused what he'd done, but it contextualized it, made him human rather than monster. He learned things about me too, about my work with at-risk youth, about my plans to help kids in situations like mine had been, about the life I'd built with intentionality and hard work, about Rufus's role in all of it, how a dog had been more family than any person for most of my adolescence. He saved my life twice, my father said one afternoon at our regular coffee shop. Once in that alley, and once by bringing you back to me. He didn't bring me back to you. He brought you to me. There's a difference. You're right. He brought me to you. Gave me a chance I didn't earn. Rufus was 10 now, moving slower, sleeping more, his muzzle almost entirely gray. The vet had started using words like senior and comfortable and quality of life. I knew what was coming, had been preparing for it in the way you prepare for inevitable heartbreak. My father noticed the change too, asked gentle questions about Rufus's health, offered to help with vet bills if I needed it. I didn't need it, had built enough stability to handle my own expenses, but the offer mattered. The caring mattered. When Rufus's health started declining more noticeably, my father showed up in ways I didn't expect. Came with me to vet appointments, sat in the waiting room, asked how he could help. Treated my grief as legitimate and important, never minimized it or suggested it was just a dog. He's not just a dog, my father said when I tried to apologize for crying in front of him. He's your family. The family that stayed when I didn't. You're allowed to grieve him. Rufus passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning in spring, 11 years old, in my arms, in the apartment we'd shared. I held him while the vet administered the medication, whispered thank you into his fur, told him he was good, so good, the best thing that ever happened to me. My father was there. I'd called him without thinking, and he'd come without hesitation, sat beside me while I fell apart, didn't try to fix it or minimize it. Just stayed. After, when Rufus was gone and the vet had left and the apartment felt impossibly empty, my father made tea and sat with me in the silence. I'm sorry, he said eventually. I'm so sorry you're losing him. He lived a good life. He was loved. Because of you. You gave him that. He gave it to me first. We sat there as the afternoon light shifted through the windows, and I understood that grief was how love persisted after loss. Rufus was gone, but what we'd been to each other remained, woven into who I'd become, impossible to separate. Thank you for being here, I said to my father. There's nowhere else I'd be. And maybe that was enough. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about erasing history or pretending harm hadn't happened. Maybe it was about recognizing that people could change, could grow, could become different than they'd been. Maybe it was about choosing connection despite pain, because isolation hurt more. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying anger, and Rufus's death had reminded me that life was finite and grudges were heavy, and sometimes you had to put things down to keep moving forward. My father and I continued meeting, continued building our strange, imperfect relationship. It would never be what it should have been, but it was something, and something felt better than nothing. I graduated with my bachelor's degree, then my master's. Started working for a youth services organization, helping kids like I'd been, trying to be for them what Mrs. Patterson and Diana and Ms. Chin had been for me. I got a dog eventually, a rescue named Luna who looked nothing like Rufus, but loved just as fiercely. My father met her with appropriate reverence, understanding what it meant that I'd trusted myself to love another animal, to open myself to that kind of loss again. We had dinner sometimes, my father and I, talked about real things occasionally, safe things mostly. Built a relationship that was ours, defined by what we made it rather than what it should have been. On the 10-year anniversary of Rufus finding my father in that alley, we went to that spot together. My father had asked if we could, if it would be okay, and I'd said yes because markers matter, remembering matters. He was a good dog, my father said, standing where he'd lain unconscious a decade ago. Best dog. I think about that night all the time. About what would have happened if you'd kept walking. If Rufus hadn't refused to leave. You would have died. Probably. And I would have deserved it. Nobody deserves to die alone in an alley. Some choices should have consequences. I looked at him, this man who'd hurt me and failed me and was trying, however imperfectly, to do better. The consequence of your choice was that you lost your daughter for 10 years. That you missed my entire adolescence, my growth, my accomplishments. That when we reconnected, it was because a dog had more loyalty than you'd shown. Those are consequences. Death isn't a consequence, it's just an ending. You're wiser than I'll ever be. I'm just someone who survived what you did to me and decided survival wasn't enough. I wanted to live, to build, to be more than my trauma. Rufus taught me that. Taught me that love is a choice you make every day, that loyalty is action, not feeling. We stood there in the fading light, two people connected by blood and pain and the slow work of reconciliation. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even a completely happy one. But it was real, honest, earned. And maybe that was enough. If you're listening to this and you've ever been thrown away by someone who should have protected you, I want you to know something. Their choice to abandon you is about them, not about your worth. Their failure to love you right doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means they were broken in ways they couldn't fix or wouldn't fix, and that brokenness wasn't your responsibility to heal. You deserve people who stay, who choose you consistently without ultimatums or conditions, who see your value even when you can't see it yourself. And if you don't have those people yet, start by being that person for yourself. Stay for yourself. Choose yourself. Build the life you deserve from whatever pieces you have, because survival is possible and growth is possible, and you are worth the effort. It took me a decade and a loyal dog to learn that. I hope it takes you less time. I hope you find your Rufus, whether that's an animal or a person or a belief system or just the stubborn conviction that you matter. Because you do matter. Your story matters. The fact that you're still here, still trying, still breathing, that matters more than any of the harm that was done to you. Stay. Choose yourself. Build something beautiful from the ruins. That's what Rufus would want. That's what I want for you. That's what you deserve.